Top 5 Scariest Psychological Experiments. 5. The bystander effect. The bystander effect was discovered by psychologists Bibb Latané and John Darley following the Kitty Genovese murder. Kitty was stabbed to death in the middle of the street in front of 38 neighbors, none of whom came to her aid, thus giving rise to this term. In the experiment conducted by Latané and Darley, an actor played the role of someone having an epileptic seizure and the behavior of people was observed. If people were alone, 85% of them went to help the person having a seizure, but when the number of witnesses to the event increased, the percentage of helpers dropped to 31%. So, in a situation where help is needed, the more people who witness the event, the lower the number of people who intervene. The reason for this is the thought that someone else will help. 4. Jane Elliott Racism Experiment. Jane Elliott, who conducted experiments on racism, separated her students by eye color and told them that brown-eyed people were better than blue-eyed people. The students were divided into two groups, and they started writing down the characteristics of blue-eyed students and began to bully them. These characteristics included things like clumsy, incompetent, stupid. Blue-eyed students who normally did not experience low self-confidence began to make mistakes. It was observed that the self-confidence of brown-eyed students increased. The next day, Jane Elliott switched the roles, and this time, the better group was blue-eyed students. In this way, students were encouraged not to bully each other and to be given the idea that there is no superior group. 3. MKUltra Project. The MKUltra Project, conducted in 1953, was an experiment aimed at observing the effects of biological and chemical materials on human behavior. However, the experiment deviated from its original purpose, and illegal drugs were tested on hundreds of Americans. Research began to find answers to questions such as how long the hypnosis effect can be extended, how insomnia can be resolved, and which drugs can be used to resist torture during interrogation. The subjects were sex workers, prisoners, and people with fatal illnesses. In addition to all the drugs given, LSD was also administered to the subjects, and the worst part was that the subjects did not know what drugs they were given. 2 people died after the experiment, and many people were left with side effects of the drugs administered. 2. Robbers Cave Experiment. In 1954, Muzaffar Sharif decided to conduct an experiment in which he aimed to reduce hostility between two opposing groups faced with a common threat. The experiment involved 22 boys aged 11 to 12 who were similar in many ways. The boys were divided into two groups and kept unaware of each other for a while. It was observed that the boys who formed a hierarchy within their group displayed hostile attitudes towards the other group when they encountered them. The activities that the two groups did together increased the competition and hatred between the teams. Based on these observations, Sharif started a forest fire and saw that both groups worked together against this common threat. However, Sharif's decision to start a forest fire and not inform the children about it received criticism. 1. Milgram Experiment. In the 1960s, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment to observe people's reactions and obedience to authority despite their personal beliefs, thoughts, and conscience. Stanley was curious about how much people would obey orders given to them and assigned participants the role of teacher, after introducing them to their partners. The student was an actor hired for this study. The teachers and students were in separate rooms and could only communicate verbally. The teacher stood in front of a generator that could deliver electric shocks from 15 to 450 volts, and they were instructed to give the student a shock for every wrong answer. Each participant in the teacher role gave the student up to 300 volts of electricity, and 2/3 of the participants gave shocks up to 450 volts, even though it was said to be dangerous. As a result of this experiment, Stanley concluded that people are obedient to orders given by a higher power, regardless of their danger or morality.